Morning to you, Helen.
Good morning, Julia.
Let's start this side of the Atlantic right now, and let's talk about what's going on in Scotland. And For Women Scotland, those wonderful campaigning women who won that statement of the bleeding obvious insanity in reality at the Supreme Court last April, that basically when you're deciding whether a man is a man or a woman is a woman, it all comes down to biological sex, and that's kind of it, rather than what you think you are. They're in court once again, this time against the Scottish Government.
That's right. So on that day when For Women Scotland got that judgment in the Supreme Court about the Equality Act, that sex means sex, not paperwork, a lawyer who was sitting there with me, I was there in the court, turned around to me and she said to me, there's nothing left for us to do.
Oh, bless.
And here we are. The government has not put that into practice. It's sitting on the guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and now For Women Scotland is having to take its own government, the Scottish Government, to court again after it lost in the Supreme Court, and this time it's about prisons. The Scottish Government, unlike the government elsewhere in the UK, puts men who identify as women into women's prisons unless it can be proved that those men are a serious risk to women, and its standard for that is that those men, for example, raped, tortured and murdered women. So it's willing to move men who raped and murdered and tortured men into women's prisons. Yeah, because that's fine. Like, they aren't going to go with the women that they're in with. And there are indeed murderers and torturers, male murderers and torturers in the women's estate right now, and have been for years in Scotland. And the Scottish Government says that it's those men's human rights. So their human rights matter, and their human rights are so important, and it's so convinced that the European Court of Human Rights is on its side on this, that it's actually compulsory for the government to dragoon women into being like supporting actresses in these men's fantasies of being women, and that is what human rights means. So For Women Scotland is standing up there again. It's got the same barrister, Aidan O'Neill, KC, making the same arguments that sex is real.
But I mean, this is the thing, we all remember the Isla Bryson case, a double rapist convicted of raping two different women, who then put on a wig, and you know, he had his meat and two veg clearly on show through his leggings. He wasn't even trying to convince anyone. He was taking the mick, and he's decided during his the criminal justice process. Oh, it turns out he thought he was Isla Bryson, obviously not his real name, that he was a woman, a trans woman, and we had that absurd situation of Nicola Sturgeon, then First Minister of Scotland, defending the rights of a double rapist to be put in a prison cell with women, arguing that, is Isla Bryson a man or a woman? Isla Bryson is a rapist. Well, is Isla Bryson a man or a woman rapist? I mean, certainly in English law, I think in Scottish law, technicality, you can't be a rapist unless you are a man. What with needing that particular appendage that we don't have? But this is really, why is this a hill they want to die on? Why, as you say, we all thought the Supreme Court ruling, that'll be it. We've got Bridget Phillipson, the Equalities Minister in the Westminster government, refusing, basically sitting for months now. I think, was it last September? The Equality and Human Rights Commission sent their guidance on. I don't know why we needed guidance after that Supreme Court ruling, but apparently we did. They've sent that to that she wants to make sure everything's inclusive. Well, you can either have a women-only space or not a women-only space. It's not complicated. She's sitting on that. Again, it seems to be a hill to die for an awful lot, whether it's Labour or SNP. Why? Why are they so adamant about the rights of not just men who identify and think that they're women, but male criminals, often sex criminals, who claim to be women?
I mean, it's puzzling, isn't it? You have to wonder what's being said behind the scenes, because, of course, there are people on the fringes of the Labour Party or SNP, and also in Scotland, the Greens offer support, and they really are all in on gender self-ID. Yeah. So that might be part of it. I also think that women in prison, most people just don't care about prisoners at all. Yeah. They think that maybe we can do a risk assessment, but we know that very few rapes are even reported to the police. So why do we think that a man who has raped and tortured and murdered men might not turn his attentions to women?
But also we know that the vast majority of women who are in prison actually have been victims of abuse by parent figures or by partners.
Absolutely.
And that's incredibly common. And therefore they're already victims.
And then the other thing I'd say is that I think there has been a lot of misunderstanding. I mean, the Supreme Court judges said this, and the HRC has acknowledged it. There's been a lot of misunderstanding of the law. And for 15 years, the great and the good were telling us that if you had that magic piece of paper, it really did change your sex for the purposes of law.
Magically.
The Supreme Court said it didn't. But those people still kind of believe that, and believe that they can't just say men are men and women are women. We have to protect, vulnerable men in the men's estate. That they will face human rights claims, and I think they might too. But they'd win them. Yeah,
well, exactly. But also there are still, I believe, 4 men in women's prisons in England as well.
Yes, so they're held in a separate wing, Downview Wing E, which I still don't think is a good solution.
They can still be held in a separate wing in a men's prison.
Exactly, but the thing is, the reason for that, and you will not believe this, the reason is so they can socialise with women and learn to be women more convincingly. That's the actual stated reason in the policy. Well, they can go off and do their cosplaying on their own, thanks, not be bothering the women with it.
Sorry, I almost said some really bad words on air, though. I had to really stop it defies me. This is, when we have these conversations, this is the whole sort of like, is everyone else listening to this? This is Alice in Wonderland madness. And again, I think, I was perhaps less confident than you were on the Supreme Court Judgment Day that this was going to be over. And the likes, some people like Piers Morgan writing books like Woke is Dead. Yeah, woke is, it is so...
Well, you were right.
It's embedded in our schools, in academia, in our politics, in our civil service, in the NHS. I mean, it's all over the place. Let's talk about where it is in the NHS state, because really interesting case. A landmark decision at New York court this in the last week has seen a young woman by the name of Fox Varian. She had her breast cut off by doctors while a teenager so that she could, quote, live as a boy. She has won $2 million in compensation for her suffering. It's expected to spark thousands more lawsuits in the US and in Britain. And basically, she's now 22. She, was very confused, thought she was a boy. She claimed in court, and her parents, as usual, parents were told, as they always are, your kid's going to commit suicide if you don't agree to the transgender jogs, and then carrying on and having her breasts cut off, which is something very much encouraged by the pro-trans movement within our NHS right now. Young men having their penises and their testicles removed. It's just extraordinary. But we've seen this happening to 18 and 19-year-olds here as well. And basically, she says, look, she expressed doubts, but they said, no, and pushed her into it. She's won her case. I'm surprised it's only 2 million. I'm surprised it's not 2 billion, frankly, for what they've done to her. Do you think that we are going to see more cases? And will this finally try and stop doctors from pushing this horrific butchery on our young people?
Well, I'm never again after the Supreme Court judgment saying there's nothing left for us to do. So I do think it's an incredibly positive step, obviously in America first. So most of these cases actually fall down on procedural grounds, or they're out of time or that sort of thing. And they tend to get settled anyway out of court. So for this to go to court and to get what is a sizable judgment, the thing I think it's going to do first in America is make insurers look at it. I mean, if I were a medical malpractice insurance firm, I would not insure gender medicine anymore. It's too clearly the mood
too big
is
a risk,
changing.
and that means you then won't do it. Doctors won't do it.
Exactly. And then you see the hospital decide that this is not a line that they will do. So that's the way I think it'll play out in America. Now here, of course, these things are being done almost entirely by the NHS, and the NHS self-insures, and it has an organisation called NHS Resolutions that deals with all the medical malpractice claims, of which there are lots. And I'm not saying all of them are justified, but there just are a lot. And nearly everything gets settled and we never find out about it.
Yeah,
so
that's the
worry. There are already cases being settled.
I'd be very surprised if there aren't. And again, isn't it fascinating though? It's always money that talks in the end. They're making, doctors get their, all the acclaim because they're the top doctor in this field. They're getting paid to do these operations, and in America as well in the private healthcare. But then if the insurance is pulled and then they can't do it, or they're getting sued, then it stops. Rather than maybe we shouldn't be cutting completely healthy breasts or completely healthy genitals of completely healthy children who are really confused and suffering from often, ADHD, autism, or often, frankly, just gay and a bit confused and have got parents who haven't supported that. It is the biggest scandal of our time. It really, really is. And it's extraordinary it's still going on. But little glimmers of hope give us hope that one day this will suddenly just, like the Salem Witch Trials, one day it just stops. Helen Joyce, you've been fantastic on all of this. Thank you for joining us.